All you beautiful ethic cuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be. Every Tuesday at noon Eastern, if you think fixing our healthcare workplaces can fix our world, I got a real treat for you today. We're going to be talking about corporate integrity agreements as strategic advantages. So like we say every single week on every single episode, drop that LinkedIn URL in the chat. Your network's your net worth, neither are big enough. So if you don't have LinkedIn, you should get on there. And if you do have LinkedIn, drop that URL in the chat, or at least drop in where you are calling in from. We, of course, are giving away CEUs on every single episode. So we got 3 CEUs. For HRCI, for SHRM, and for the CCB. So you can build those credits and keep stacking those up. We have a great giveaway this week. We're going to be giving away the Compliance Week Toolkit. We're, of course, giving away some books. We're going to be giving away Bootstrapping Ethics, so that we're going to be giving away 5 copies of those. Of course, if you get selected, you can pick any of the books in the Ethico library. Just Google Ethico library, and you'll see all those amazing books. If you want to pick some of those up on Amazon, or stay active in the chat and increase your odds to win. So we're going to be giving away 5 of those. We have a great giveaway. You know, Ethico has been famous for creating toolkits, creating enablement for compliance teams to really drive their impact in the organization. Of course, it's all free. I don't even like making money around here. I like giving away books and giving away webinars. So we have a Compliance Week Toolkit. It is a free resource. It's a hub that solves a lot of your biggest compliance challenges during Compliance Week. So our job during Compliance Week is to make ethics engaging without massive budget. So if you haven't started thinking about Compliance Week, it is not too late to spin something up. If you've never done something before, just do something this week. And it's all about a game of incrementalism. So scan this QR code. And check the chat for the link. Go ahead and download all those things. Also want to share with you our risk assessment tool has been gaining a lot of traction. We released that a couple of months ago. And we have a risk intelligence package that's 25% off. So how many of you are still doing risk assessments by hand? 76% of compliance teams, based on a recent survey, are focusing on risk management, upping their game in risk management. But the overwhelming majority of us are still doing them in spreadsheets. So we built this tool because we kept hearing about all those pain points, risk assessments that take forever to build, risk assessments that nobody wants to complete, and then you're stuck trying to make sense of all this data in the spreadsheet. So we asked ourselves, what if we could make this way easier? So let me show you what we came up with. So we came up with a quick and easy drag and drop builder. So there's no expertise required. You can start fast with we have a massive library of a bunch of pre-built templates, and you can clone and iterate quickly, make little tweaks to particular forms you're going to be sending out, questionnaires you're going to be sending out to different groups within your organization. The other great thing is it's user-friendly and it's accessible to all the stakeholders. So it's obviously optimized for mobile. We can automate the reminders that actually work, that drive that engagement. We can't do compliance on our own. We need the engagement from stakeholders, from these risk sensors in the organization. So those reminders are built right in, and it's going to give you real-time visibility. So you can monitor the participation rate, follow up with people as necessary, Slack their boss and let them know that they need to go ahead and fill that out. And finally, the name of our game is making better bets with our time. We all have limited resources. The scope of compliance continues to change. The risk landscape that we're traversing across is changing faster than ever. And so when we can translate risk data into actionable intelligence, we can make better bets with our time. So there's interactive heat maps across any of the questionnaires or any of the risk assessments that you're going to be sending out, lets you drill down to details and give you executive ready reporting. So it's on us to make our impact in our organization. It's on us to grab that steering wheel of our career and of our department. And this tool is really going to help you do that to a greater degree. So this whole tool, this whole piece of software that we built was really based on input from all of you. So those of you who shared your insights and your ideas, thank you so much for those. And we've pulled all that together into the risk intelligence package. So this bundles several of our pieces of software that let you leverage, that can kind of give you a lot more leverage and get you better data to make better insights, right? We make better bets with our time. We drive the effectiveness of our program forward. And the name of our game is really efficiency. So if you book a demo during the Ethicsverse, you get 25% off. So round of applause to the Ethico team for putting that together. Okay, I want to introduce you to Ross Ronan. If you don't know him, welcome to Earth. Ross is a friend. He's someone I've learned so much from. Love his podcast, love his organization. And he heads up Ronan Healthcare Consulting. So his team help healthcare executives turn regulatory requirements into strategic advantages. He's built his entire career, and he has myriad examples of how he's helped organizations really do that, really increase the ROI, really increase the enterprise value of their organization by turning compliance into a strategic lever. So if you're thinking about expansion, if you're navigating an acquisition, or you just want compliance handled by an expert, you want a little bit of that help, definitely reach out to Ross's team. And he has the Compliance Advantage podcast. That's part of the Ethico library of podcasts. We've highlighted that several times. But his podcast is great for healthcare leaders who want some great strategies. It's not a bunch of theories. It's stuff that you can kind of put into practice immediately. A lot of great perspective from him. So how's it going, Ross? Welcome to the Ethics. Welcome back to the Ethicsverse. Let's get a massive emoji explosion for Ross.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite back. I guess I didn't mess up before, so we're good.
No. Some of our best episodes are ones that you are on. You just have such a common sense approach, and always great to get you back on this topic that I think is extremely interesting. Would have loved to see, no offense, you look great, of course, but would have loved to see that sort of knight's armor make its way today. Okay.
That would have been awesome, but I don't have that quite yet. So.
All right. So we're going to be talking today about turning CIAs into a strategic advantage, into a strategic lever. So corporate integrity agreements are becoming, are increasingly becoming private equity targets. So these create a unique kind of collision between regulatory scrutiny and investor due diligence, which are both kind of demanding the same thing, proof that our compliance programs work. So we're going to be talking today about, CIA survival strategies. We're going to be talking about building compliance infrastructures that satisfy those federal monitors, and also why some organizations emerge from CIAs stronger than ever, and how you can sort of borrow some of those tactics to make your program better. So I want to start out by talking about the CIA landscape and why this matters now. So how do you think this intersection of private equity, which you do a lot of work with private equity funds, how is this intersection of private equity investment and regulatory enforcement starting to change the way that you think about CIAs from a compliance leadership or compliance executive perspective?
It's funny when I think back, and someone told me the other day I was a Gen 1 compliance officer, which made me feel really old and kind of sad. But over my career, I've managed in and out of and managed through 9 corporate integrity agreements throughout my career. So I've really, had the opportunity of figuring out exactly how to manage them. And, part of a company that's actually gone public-private acquisition by private equity groups under multiple CIAs, depending on how big your company is. And so when we look at kind of the landscape today with private equity and people investing in these healthcare organizations, oftentimes we see that if you have a CIA, there's this fear that the CIA is going to devalue your company or think that you've done something wrong. And on the opposite side of that, it really has created this indication that somebody has signed off on what you're doing on a compliance program, and you've actually taken the efforts to make your compliance program operationalized and working the way it should be working. And it really does become more of an advantage than it does become a hindrance. But you hear this all of the time when private equity, do they have a corporate integrity agreement? Do they have something that is a requirement versus something that is just a want to have a compliance program because I'm really engaged in having that program. So when we kind of talk through this a little bit, I'm going to refer to a little bit more to what does it mean to have that advantage as a corporate integrity agreement when people are looking at investing in an organization or just being a part of it.
Do you think private equity firms are kind of starting to look at compliance less as a cost center and more as, like a requirement or a means by which sort of enterprise value can be created more readily, or in a more sort of, that generates kind of a higher expected value in their investment?
I think it really kind of depends on which private equity groups. The ones that we work with have really seen it as a strategic advantage because they're like, look, I've invested. I want to protect my investment. I want to make sure we're doing the right thing. And I want to make sure that when we go to market thereafter that we are clean, like we know what we're doing, and they really made that investment in that organization. And then there's a lot of them out there who just don't fully understand, and that's kind of why we created the Compliance Advantage podcast. It was like, there's no benefit to me other than getting information out to people to make sure that they know kind of what those advantages are. And so we talked to a lot of private equity, we talked to a lot of CEOs that may or may not have understood that they have this strategic advantage when they have these compliance programs in place. And even if you have a corporate integrity agreement, that can be an advantage for you, right? You can sell that as, hey, we've already done the hard work and the heavy lifting, and now it's time for someone to just kind of use that compliance program as your guardrails so that you can go 100 miles an hour down the road to grow and to expand and to have strategy. And my compliance program has put my guardrails up there so that I don't flip over them and get myself in trouble, right? So I do feel like there's quite a few that have come around to it, but I wouldn't say all of them have. I'd say probably 50-50 maybe at this point in time.
I mean, it makes sense though at some level, or at least the first part of what you were saying. As bad of a sort of reputation some private equity firms have, like at the highest level, they're investing dollars into businesses and they're trying to grow those businesses. They're trying to build a business, they're trying to buy a business that's hard to buy and make it easy to sell. And when a CIA is involved or when a robust compliance program is developed during that hold period, it does make it easier to sell. It makes the due diligence so much easier. They can look, they can kind of look behind the walls and see that, okay, there's no kind of black mold there,
One thing that I do want to point out, Nick, is I think this is really important, and I used to get people asking me this all the time, and they still ask me it today, people being private equity CEOs. Where do I get sign off? Where do I get the gold star for my compliance program? Where do I get this certification on my compliance program that I am the best, right? There's not a person out there, there's not a company out there, there's not a certification body that's going to say, you have the best compliance program ever, here's your gold star. I wish we had that. It'd be great, right? Hopefully Ronan someday will actually do that and you can be like Ronan certified. But guess what? Under a corporate integrity agreement, when the OIG signs off on your annual reports and they say, good job, that is your gold star, right? And no one gets that unless you have a corporate integrity agreement or some mandate, but no one wants to have a mandate. But literally, you get to say, I have been signed off every year on my compliance program by the OIG. They feel like we're doing the right thing. That's an advantage. Huge, huge advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's like a verification that what's in place is sort of passing muster,
Exactly.
And I guess like so much of our impact is really a function of our mindset, and so much of how we're viewed is a function of framing. Like if we have the wrong mindset about a CIA, we can go one way, but if we can view it as the strategic potential advantage that you're talking about, we can go kind of a totally different way, and that should allow us to reframe not only our role, but like what role this thing has played on our department or on the broader business.
Yeah, I used to tell when we'd go public, private, or we do a private equity acquisition, I used to tell them, call up my monitor. Like, here you go. Here's the OIG. Feel free to give her a call. Like, right. I'm happy to do that because they look at us and go, wow, thank God you're on this one. Thank God your compliance program is here. We know you're going to do a great job. And I'm happy to go, yeah, we've been out there and we've had that kind of discussion with our monitors and they're like, yes, good job. Thank you.
So when you hear that an organization is under a CIA, what's your immediate reaction to that? And how has that reaction maybe changed over your career? Like, how did you used to look at it versus now after kind of having been through 9 of them and have the frame that you have now?
Yeah, when you first started, that's a bad thing. You've done something really bad and you're a bad person. Right. And I think that's how the general consensus was with a corporate integrity agreement. Now I look at it, if we're doing due diligence and someone has a corporate integrity agreement, the first thing I go is, what happened? What'd you do wrong? Because someone always does something wrong, and that's okay. That happens. And then what did you do to fix it? And have you changed the way that you do things? And it's the same thing with every compliance program, regardless of whether you are in a corporate integrity or not. There's 3 things, right? Prevention, detection, and mitigation. Those are the 3 things that we do all of the time. And if you're not doing one of those 3 pillars as a compliance program, you ain't a compliance program, I hate to tell you. And that's the same kind of concept with a corporate integrity agreement. Have you mitigated the issue that has brought you here? And are you doing things to prevent it from happening again, right? Those are the huge things that I always ask about to say, what do you have going on? Even if it's not a corporate integrity agreement, let's say it's a UPIC audit, let's say it's a massive overpayment, or you've done something with that and you're looking at it from a diligence perspective. It's the same concept. Okay, you had it, happens to everybody. 2, what'd you do to fix it? And how are you preventing it, right? Those are the 3 things that I always look at from that perspective, and, making sure that they're have done the right thing and they're actually fixing it. So,
great comment from Kelly. Thanks for this, Kelly. She said organizations often treat CIAs as a wake-up call, and I think we're going to be talking some more about that in a minute. But to this kind of perspective shift that you kind of alluded to, and that I've sort of seen in the market over my time in this industry, is that there seems to be kind of a perception shift, or it's at least available to go from like viewing it as, a company under a CIA, oh, that's damaged goods, as opposed to one that's coming out of a CIA as really like a battle-tested program, kind of to your point. You've fixed a lot of things, you've remediated a lot of things, you've put some controls in place, you're better sort of able to, manage whatever residual risks exist in the business. And I think it's an important mindset, again, to what Renee said here, mindset is everything. It's an important mindset to maintain, because it's going to be on us to navigate our organization through that CIA, or it's going to be on us to navigate ourselves away from a CIA and using the potential for a CIA to occur to get the endorsement we need or the resources we need to make sure that we can kind of avoid that storm,
Absolutely. 100%. And great comments from everybody on the, I want to get into this wake up call conversation, because I think that's a great conversation by Kelly. So,
well, let's jump into that now. We can talk about CIA scope in a second, but let's talk about this wake up call and how you've seen it go right, how you've seen people kind of pull that wake up call forward, even in the absence of an actual CIA in place. Like, let's talk about that topic.
Yeah, again, based on the rules of 3s, there's 3 things that I see all the time when people discover they want a compliance program. 1, somebody up high says, we need a compliance program, whether it's a board, a private equity says, we're going to do this now. 2, you've got leadership who says, I've been there, I've done that, I know what the benefits are, I know what the strategic pieces are, I want to put in a compliance program now. And then 3, to Kelly's point, you get in trouble, right? You get in trouble, okay. It's a wake-up call, and now I got slapped on the wrist, and I had to pay a bunch of money, and now I had to put in a compliance program. And so when you take that latter approach, right, which is, I got in trouble and I'm going to have to do it, that cost is so much more expensive than if you did it up front and have prepared for it and invested in that compliance program. And I have been a part of quite a few new corporate integrity agreements where we have come into it and they've said, wow, you already have the infrastructure, and therefore just keep doing what you're doing and make sure that we are rolling this issue into your current compliance program. And you get credit for that, right? You get credit. And sometimes even if there's an overpayment or an investigation that is going on and you're not just having a bookshelf compliance program, right? You've written it down, you stick it on the bookshelf and no one's looking at it. And it's a living, breathing, active thing. Some of your investigations, some of your settlements, they don't even want a corporate integrity agreement because they know that you're doing the right thing. And so preparing up front and having that discussion with the leadership to say, the money you spend today as an investment in this organization and this compliance program will save you millions of dollars on the end, because you won't have civil monetary penalties, you won't have fines, you won't have all those kind of things. You might have an overpayment every now and then, but we're still having that active compliance program. So if it's always reactionary to something that is going on, it's always going to cost you tenfold.
Yeah. What do you think the cost differential is? It's probably not 1,000 times more expensive, but you think it's like 5 to 10, 10 to 20 times more expensive, something like that?
5 to 10.
Yeah.
I generally use the six range, right? $6 range. So every dollar you spend on compliance is a $6 savings, and legal fees, settlements, negotiation, whatever it may be. And there was some multiple studies out there kind of looking at that as a risk factor. And in my mind, I see that on the daily, and I see, okay, you can come back and prove you have an active compliance program. I go, wow, okay, you're still trying to do the right thing, but still owes money back. That's fine. But imagine the civil monetary penalties, the legal fees, and everything else associated with it. They just become more costly and expensive, which you don't have to have.
And, something else you said I want to key in on, this fact that you get credit for something in place, and that I think regulators know that things are going to go wrong, even with, the best programs out there. It's just sort of a natural thing, right? Like even in a hermetically sealed manufacturing environment, they have to clean that from time to time. You understand what I'm saying? So just knowing that, I think, should give us a little bit of lower anxiety around it, that you're probably going to be dealing with somebody that is somewhat common sense. And if you're putting a good faith effort toward building a program that's comprehensive, that's going to be working to mitigate, working to prevent, then you're going to get some credit for that. And that's something that I think we can hang our hat on a little bit.
Yeah, and if you remember why compliance programs came about in the first place with the federal sentencing guidelines, on white collar crimes and how judges and courts were supposed to enforce penalties under the federal sentencing guidelines, the whole purpose was to say, if you have a compliance program, we are going to give you credit and not have such severe penalties and fines. And the reason that people started creating compliance programs in the first place were to get this credit, and not just to stick it on the shelf, but it has to do something. You're trying to do the right thing. And so we're always trying to get that kind of, yes, we're good. Yes, we're doing the right thing. Yes, we have the right mentality. And it helps a company become very strategic and have that huge advantage.
So, I don't know how many years this is in dog years, but 9 CIAs is kind of a lot. So what kind of trends have you seen in CIA scope and requirements compared to agreements from maybe 5 or 10 years ago? And what does that kind of tell you, or what can we kind of glean from that in terms of where enforcement priorities are and where they're heading?
They still, there's 2 sections generally to a corporate integrity agreement, right? One is the active compliance program. What do you have? And then the next one is, what did you do wrong and how are we going to monitor it so you don't do it again, right? The IRO requirements, whether it's a, covered entity or covered arrangements, a CIA or a billing CIA, whatever it may be, right? You have this IRO piece of it. And when you look at the compliance program build, I think that has kind of developed and expanded of what it's supposed to be. But I remember back in the day, let's just take training and education is a great example. I remember back in the day, we had training and education. It was, you need to have 2 hours of training and education for X, Y, and Z. You need to have 1 hour of board training. And it was like based on this hard line approach of hours or whatever it may be. You look at it today, they say you need to have a training plan in place. What makes sense? What's actually going to work for your organization? How do we educate people instead of just trying to say you need an hour's worth of training? Push play. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to listen to Nick talk, and I'm going to go over here and do the dishes while you're playing in the background, and I still get my hours worth of credit. They don't want that anymore, right? They want a practical compliance approach that says, how do we educate? How do we make people understand and learn what to do and what not to do, so that we don't get ourselves in trouble again. And I've seen a lot of the corporate integrity agreements take this morphed into this kind of practical approach for a compliance program versus just very rigid on what it may be, which I think is great, because the OIG and the DOJ with their guidance that have come back are really trying to be a little bit more proactive and realistic on what a compliance program can be. And corporate integrity agreements are the baseline product for an effective compliance program. And I would encourage everybody on this call, the 175 people that are on this call, and everybody who's doing the chats here, pick up a corporate integrity agreement. Go look at the latest ones. Look at what they're requiring you to do as a compliance program. Butt that up against your compliance program and see if you make the difference. We do due diligence. We set up our compliance program based upon that. That's where my experience comes from. That's where everything is shown through. And it's a blueprint for doing exactly what needs to be done. And it's a great way to do it, regardless of all the books and all the crap that's published out there. And I'm not saying everything's crap, but you want to know exactly what a CIA is, go to the CIA website from the OIG, pick up a few, take a look at them. They're very interesting.
I mean, it kind of allows you to teach to the test in a way. Like that's the test. That's what they're going to be looking at. You know, you look at 2 or 3 of those, you're going to get a pretty good picture of what rocks they're going to be looking under, what kind of, components of your program they're going to be wanting to validate.
If you're not looking at the work plan too, right? If you're not looking at CIAs, you're not looking at the OIG work plan, the cliff notes are there, right? Follow the cliff notes of what it needs to be as a compliance program for sure.
So Kelly had a great question here. How does the impact of a CIA affect the reputation of the organization in the long run, just based on your experience and what you've seen?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, it depends on how you handle it and what you do with it, right? There's a lot of organizations who have had CIAs in the past. Columbia, go down the list of things that have been an organization that has been routinely kind of under these agreements. They become great organizations later on down the road, and that's great. HCA, go down the list of all these places, Tenet, that have had multiple corporate integrity agreements. They still have a good reputation because they've reacted to it in the positive manner. If you react to it in a negative manner and you kind of thumb your nose at the OIG and you're just trying to get through your 5 years so that you can go back to the way that you've done, we all know these organizations and we all know that it's actually creating, we call it patient trust equity, and that's part of the strategic advantage. Once patients start seeing these organizations get in trouble over and over again because they don't fix and they don't mitigate, you lose that patient trust equity in that organization and the reputation goes out the window.
It's like the Wells Fargo effect,
It's huge, right? Enron, go down the list of all these people that you just are like, don't ever want to see them kind of dawn your door. And it ends up happening. So it's how you react to it, not the fact that you have one. I mean, it's a great question, Kelly, but I don't think it's because you have one. It's how you react to it and how you raise to the level of achievement.
And, back to your point about like how the scope has changed, it seems like they've really moved from input focused to output focused, or like prescription based to really like, what's the impact? Like, you know what I'm saying? Which gives us a lot of freedom to apply really common sense as opposed to, they're clearly trying to move away from this check the box thing to say, okay, I have my 1 hour training. Okay, I have this thing. Okay, that box is checked. I can put this program on the shelf. And I think that gives us a lot of freedom. Again, the Cliff Notes are out there to your point, but it gives us a lot of freedom to apply what is necessary for our business that's really going to move the risk mitigation needle.
Yeah. And if you look at it in the big scheme of things, and by the way, I think it's always funny when I hear people just say, I've been in healthcare compliance for 30 years. I'm like, okay, you're lying. It hasn't been around for 30 years. Like literally the OIG guidance came out in the late 90s, right? So it's like, it hasn't really been around that long. And you think about it from that perspective, healthcare compliance really hasn't been around that long either, 20 years, right. Ish. And now you're looking at it going, okay, we're learned from our past behaviors. We're learned from our mistakes of when it first came out. And now we're a little bit more sophisticated in the compliance realm. We know how to do things. We know how to make things better. And this is why becoming compliance as a strategic advantage is where we need to be, as opposed to the internal affairs, the police officers of the organization, as opposed to the strategic operation officer that can help out with the organization going 100 miles an hour down the highway, right? Without flipping over the guardrails.
So let's pivot a little bit into some of these kind of, let's get kind of tactical and practical here and talk about infrastructure that actually works. When you think about like compliance monitoring programs, what do you think separates, checking the box activities from monitoring that actually strengthens the organization, that's actually flexible, anti-fragile, resilient, whatever you want to call it?
And monitoring, you mean kind of the auditing and monitoring section of the requirements?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have this conversation with a lot of my clients and my staff all the time. We don't audit and monitor just to audit and monitor. That is not what a compliance program should do, right? Mm-hmm. You need to have a rationale of what you're looking at, why you're looking at it, and what effects does it have to the organization. You have to be able to sit down and go, this can help our organization be better and not violate certain issues that we have to violate. So when you talk about like a compliance program that becomes more kind of living, breathing, working with the organization, you're looking at those high risk, high utilized codes, those referral sources that can can create an issue for you down the road. Go down the list of things that you're like really pinpointing what you're looking at so that you can say, we don't have these issues. I'm not worried about them. Yeah, there's little things that are going to happen out here, but they're not significant enough to say, we can't fix those really easily. So you really have to look at the things that matter, not just do things to do things. And,
right.
Ultimately, I see a lot of people just kind of doing these audits across the board. They don't look at the codes. They don't look at it being like a CIA, or they don't look at it being like a UPIC audit or something else. They just kind of look at things across the board. And they come back to their boards and say, we have all these problems. And the board says, oh my God, what are we going to do about it? And you go, well, nothing really. It's not that big of an effect to the organization. So really focusing in on what you're doing on your monitoring side of it is so important, because it really makes a difference.
Yeah. And what a credibility sort of killer to have that conversation with the board. Say, look at all the stuff I'm doing. And it's like, yeah, none of it really matters. I mean, it comes down to what we're talking about on the Ethicsverse all the time. It's like making better bets with our time and making, life is way closer to a game of Texas Hold'em. Compliance is way closer to a game of Texas Hold'em than it is to a game of chess. At a game of chess, all the information is on the board. You can see all the information available. You might not know what move the other person is going to make, but it's right all there for you to see. In Texas Hold'em, it's constantly revealing new information. New information is revealed all the time, and you have to make bets in the context of what information is available. And I think when we kind of do that myopic, one foot in front of the other kind of a thing, we lose the potential impact. I think it's a big killer for the potential impact, and it prevents us from really showing up as a business person. Like, the marketing team is not doing what they were doing 10 years ago. Sure. You know what I'm saying? Same thing every single day. They're changing all the time because there's new challenges in marketing, and salespeople have to sell different, and software development teams, they have to do things differently because there's new tools and there's new constraints and all that kind of stuff. You have this framework of not being a compliance professional, but being a compliance executive. Let's kind of talk about that really quick, because I think that feeds in really well to this topic of conversation and to the, let's call it the dexterity that we need to exhibit inside of our organization to kind of double clutch and change direction and pivot accordingly.
Yeah. So just to kind of put those two concepts together, I think you hit it right on the head, right? I think the difference is being strategic and not being strategic. And as a compliance executive, which we've talked about quite a bit, you're strategic. And when you're a compliance officer and you're not strategic, you're following a checklist, in my mind. And so I think you really need to change your mentality as a compliance executive to go, when I think about an audit, I think about how it affects the organization. How can I make change? How can I protect ourselves, right? That is being strategic. It's just like going to a strategic planning session and having someone just talk a bunch of corporatese that they're using these big words that they really don't mean anything, and you can't actually put those into effect, versus someone who's saying, this is how we take it to the next step. And that's the same thing with a compliance executive. If you're not looking at ways of improving the organization through compliance, you're not being a compliance executive, and you're not being strategic. Whether you're doing monitoring and auditing, whether you are doing training and education, are your policies relevant? Are they on point? Do they make sense? Can people understand them? All of those things combined has to do with how you can strategically work as a compliance executive. When you start doing that too, by the way, people will start tapping you on the shoulder as a compliance officer and a compliance executive to say, why don't you come over here? Let's have a conversation. We want to build out in this new area. We want to build out in this new state. We want to do this new specialty. I want you here beside me to talk through this. And that's how you get to become part of that strategic discussion.
Well, and like, what's more strategic than sort of tapping into everyone's self-interest and showing up as a valuable resource? Like, if you want to get access, if you want to be brought into conversation sooner, the best way to do that is to show yourself as a capable teammate and, exhibit that sort of executive level thinking that you're talking about all the time. I don't know. That to me is like the name of the game. We have value to add in our organizations. We have a unique perspective that other departments don't have, that other leaders don't have. And I think it's kind of incumbent on us to exhibit the qualities necessary to where, you're getting invited in versus, trying to elbow your way into a party you weren't invited to.
Yeah, it's not easy. And I'd love to say that it's easy. And I spent, 15, 17 years as an executive vice president, in addition to being a compliance officer. So I had the opportunity of sitting down with some very high people. But any compliance officer out there who really wants to get to the executive level really needs to have that kind of mentoring and that kind of discussion with people who have been there, whether it's your CEO, COO, whether it's outside mentor, whatever it may be. It takes a lot to get there because it's a difference in mentality.
Totally.
Once it clicks,
then you start seeing it everywhere.
You see it, and people see it in you. And that's really the piece that's more importantly. They see it in you, and they're like, I did a podcast with my former CEO, and I probably did this on the Ethicsverse before, so sorry if I repeat it. We were doing the podcast, and it's Bill Sanger. The first thing that he said to me was, Ross, I always saw you as a business executive before I saw you as a compliance officer. And I was like, wow, I don't think I could ever have more of a compliment than that.
Totally.
And it's just like, that's how you want people to see you, and that's how you want to be seen.
It's not easy, but it's possible. And also nothing easy is fun. So it's also fun to like acquire these skills and acquire this new perspective, you know?
Well, if it's easy, everybody would do it. And therefore it's not special. So,
but you got to be open to it. To your point, you have to be 100%. Searching for it to try to get better and to try to, how can I add more value inside my organization? What's different between the viewpoint or the perspective that I have currently versus, my mentor or the person who's higher up that I look up to? How are they looking at these problems? Are they looking at it more from a Pareto perspective? Are they looking at it more from, look, in like expertise, I say this all the time, but expertise in any field is really kind of boils down to, in my mind, it boils down to knowing what matters and what doesn't matter. Like the best movies that have really tight editing, they have hours and hours of extra footage that's on the editing room floor, but they're able to cut out the stuff that doesn't matter. And it's kind of like Michelangelo, one of my favorite artists of all time. Like a sculptor is constantly chipping away at the stuff that doesn't matter to reveal the thing that does matter, the masterpiece inside. And I think when we can try to acquire that type of mentality, we can start to take a critical eye to the things that, our time sucks, that are not really moving the needle, that aren't feeding us, that aren't feeding the organization, and start to experiment with like not doing those things and really focusing more on the things that matter most.
I totally agree. And I think that's focusing on the things that matter makes you strategic, and checking the box is the easy thing to do because you're checking the box because you have to do it, right? I think
the best compliance officers are sculptors. How do you like that?
Yeah, that's a great one. I like that. I love that.
Right. So if you could focus on only 3 elements of your compliance program to quote unquote prove it's effective, not just well documented, what do you think those things would be and why?
In this order: leadership, and we redefined the 7 elements, right? So leadership, disclosure program, auditing and monitoring. And I'll tell you why, right? So without leadership, without your compliance executive, without your executive compliance committee and your compliance committee of the board, it doesn't have the infrastructure to have the right guidance about what's important for the whole organization and how you're going to put these things in place. Without those pieces, and I see it all the time, we have this compliance officer and they don't really have a compliance committee. They don't really have these things above because they don't feel like they have to, or the company doesn't want it. You're missing out on a huge section of organizational leadership and effectiveness of that compliance program. Everybody should have a dog in the compliance program hunt. This is why I always call it compliance program, not compliance department. There is a department, but the program is what's important. And that requires leadership as a compliance executive, compliance committees, and board level. So that's 1. 2, your disclosure program, and I call it disclosure program. That's what I call Ethico, by the way. You hate it when I call it disclosure program.
I love it. I love whatever you say, honestly, dude. I steal so much of your lines. So, yeah, keep them coming.
So because you're using it as an organization, it's not a compliance hotline. Yes, it is part of that, but you're using it as an organization, as a window into the soul of what's happening with the employees and how you get information. I don't care if it's HR, I don't care if it's finance, I don't care if it's operations, I don't care if it's payroll, I don't care if it's compliance. You're reaching into the soul of the organization and letting them have a voice to say, these are the problems that I have. So that disclosure program, prevention, detection, mitigation, right? You can't detect unless you know open lines of communication to have that that program in place. So number one thing to do is put that disclosure program in place and then have that tracking system on the back end of it to make sure you know what's going on. Third, part of that detection pieces of it too, all prevention, detection, mitigation fall within auditing and monitoring, right? You got to be able to detect so that you can mitigate and you can prevent it from happening. If you're not testing, you're not picking up rocks, you're not looking at what's underneath of it, you're not actually doing the work, you'll never know what's going on. And the worst risks that an organization have are the risks they don't know. Right? It's the Titanic reference. I say this all the time. Titanic's coming. They see this little thing of iceberg that's coming out of the water. That's not what sunk the Titanic. It was this huge, massive thing underneath the water that sunk it. No one was looking underneath the water, right? And you didn't turn in time. It's the same thing with auditing and monitoring. If you're not looking underneath the water, if you're not picking things up, you'll never know and you'll collide and it will sink you.
So you said leadership. You said
disclosure
program, and then the mitigation efforts.
Auditing and monitoring. Yep.
Auditing
and monitoring. Yep.
So when we're thinking about auditing and monitoring, or we're looking at things to like hang our hat on or to let us sleep well at night, I see a lot of us tend to focus on the easy things, which are activity-based metrics, as opposed to outcome-based metrics, which are kind of inherently a little bit more amorphous, a little bit harder to like wrap our mind around and analyze and so forth. Let's say somebody is like hitting the emoji button, which they should be, loving everything you're saying. How do we put that into practice to really kind of focus in on like the right North Stars? The leadership thing, that's going to be sort of, that's going to be a vibe, right? Like you can, of course, like diagnose whether the leadership is endorsing you or whether that's sort of like overarching, leadership of the program to the extent that it's truly like circulating throughout the organization. Fine. You can look at sort of, how, in the disclosure program, the second thing, how we are, how much interaction we're getting from the stakeholder group, right? We can look at some of those kinds of metrics, but in terms of like effectiveness metrics, what are you really kind of looking at? That are kind of a little bit more outcome-based than maybe activity-based that might give us a false sense of security of like program effectiveness.
When I think about it, it's all together though, Nick. So when I do think about, let's say leadership, let's look at the disclosure program and even kind of auditing and monitoring, right? To me, it's all one. And if you want to look at the effectiveness of a compliance program, I don't care if you're auditing 1 million charts or if you're finding everything that's going on. If your executive team doesn't know that information is being done and how to interact with it or how to do something with it, that leadership portion of the element, then you're doing it for no reason. Literally, you're doing it for your own benefit, right? That doesn't make it. It's the same thing with the disclosure program. If you have all these calls that are coming in, nothing is being tracked, trended. You're not looking at it for different areas that are happening, or I'm getting a lot of calls related to a conflict of interest or a kickback issue in this certain area, this certain doc, this certain employee, and you're not doing anything with that, you might as well not do it at all. And so communication is really important when it comes to kind of surfacing the issues and making big changes. So I do think that it's really important to take that next level where you're doing all this auditing and monitoring, you're doing all this open lines of communication, and then what? And then you do what with it? And that's really the biggest piece that everybody needs to focus on is, what am I doing and why do I care?
That's a great point.
If I can answer the question, why do I care? Then you can figure out what you're going to do to mitigate it and to fix it. And I think that's the number one thing.
Yeah, it's got to be more of a cycle, kind of to your point, right? Like we're looking at data points, some are activity-based, some are outcome-based, whatever, but that needs to feed back into how we're directing our efforts and our actions on an initiative level basis to try to improve those metrics. And I think it's easy to do these analyses, to your point, and they just sort of fall into a stack, and that stack, goes, higher than a tower. If they're not infiltrating back into or circling back into our work plans and where our focuses are over time, then those are going to be of no value. That's a pretty important point. And, it also made me think about, program effectiveness is to a compliance program what like health is to a human body. Health is like this like elusive thing that you can continue to chase. If you see somebody who does like Ironman challenges or somebody who's like a bodybuilder or something, they always have like new goals for themselves on how they can get stronger, how they can get healthier and so forth. So really like, it's not a game of becoming healthy. It's a game of becoming more healthy. It's not a game of becoming effective or perfect. It's a game of like approaching that like elusive destination. And how else can you triangulate and like validate whether you're making progress if you're not seeing movement in these sort of composite data points that kind of come out of your program?
It's interesting you say that too. And you can think about athletes, the Bob, whatever, of The Biggest Loser. I don't remember his name, but he's really in shape and everything. He had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Right. And ended up having a bypass or having an angioplasty or something of that nature. And you think about it, it's like, you may look healthy on the outside, but if you're not also looking on the inside and discovering what's going on, like you said, and picking up rocks and looking internally on a health perspective, you never know what's going to happen. It could be a ticking time bomb. That's the same thing with a compliance program too, right? You have this kind of facade of where it's going to go, but you need to make sure that it's doing something behind the scenes so that it actually can be healthy organization. It can understand what's going on in the darks and in the corners of the world so that you can make changes and you can be more healthy on a go-forward basis like a healthy organization.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so how do we kind of start to shift? I want to talk about, I want to dive a little bit deeper into how CIAs can really become this competitive advantage. How do you think we can shift organizational culture or mindsets at the leadership level or at the board level from viewing CIA obligations as burdensome restrictions to seeing them as potential competitive differentiators in the crowded healthcare market? What kind of talk tracks, what kind of framing would you use to help kind of shift that mindset and kind of screw those light bulbs on at the top?
No one likes to have a mandate, especially no one likes to have a mandate. No one likes to be told what to do. Right? I hate to tell you that. No one does. And no one definitely likes to be told what to do by the federal government. But on the same token, it's a nice way to have a blueprint and a roadmap of what you're going to do. And we've already kind of talked about that a little bit. And so when you think about where you're at with the corporate integrity agreement, and this is what I used to tell partners that wanted to partner with us or acquisitions or whatever, I used to say, look, yeah, we have these. We're going to do this anyways. Like, okay, so I know you think when the 5 years are over on this corporate integrity agreement, you get to save all this money or you get to stop doing X and you got to stop doing Y and you stop doing Z. I look at them and I'm going to go, no. Companies invested in this compliance program. They didn't invest because it's a CIA. They invested because they believe in compliance. They just have to do it because there was a CIA. And so that's okay. But we are going to continue to do this at these same levels thereafter. Maybe we won't have an IRO, so there's a little bit of money savings there, but we'll still have audits. We'll still do it by third party. We'll still have those expenditures. We'll still do effectiveness reviews. But at the end of the day, you're looking at it going, okay, we are going to continue to do this because this is a culture of compliance with this organization. This is how they live and breathe. And regardless of the CIA or not, we are going, yes, it was a great start. Yeah, when it's over, don't have the mandate. We are still going to do it because this company is committed to it. And I think that's really an important thing to be able to communicate to people is regardless of what we're under today, nothing is going to change thereafter. And I think if you can explain that, that's really the talking points that you really want to have. Great infrastructure, great start. We are going to continue this on as a program that is going to be kind of ever growing, ever changing, but always getting better to be able to be strategic for the organization. So,
I mean, let's say you're not Bob from Biggest Loser, not this paragon of health who has, an angioplasty, but maybe you're unhealthy. How crazy would it be after you go through recovery, after the heart attack or whatever, to just go back to all those old habits? Of course, we would never do that for ourselves. So I think we have to have that same kind of mentality and exhibit that kind of leadership because that's why we're in the position. We're supposed to drive the compliance culture forward in our organization. Again, back to this mindset thing. If we have that right mindset, we're going to have that boldness and confidence to set the vision that you just that you just shared. And I think there's a lot of influence that we can have at that level if those folks at the board level are viewing it in the wrong way or viewing it in an old way as it's this burdensome thing that's not really going to change the way we do business on a go forward basis. Without that boldness or confidence, we really do run the risk of reverting back to it. But when we can shift that frame and we can screw that light bulb on, like I said, we have a much higher kind of we really increase the odds that we can sort of stay the course and not like fall victim to the same heart attack again.
Yeah, and if you think about it as being an advantage, a want to versus a have to, and seeing how it can be an advantage for the organization, they won't want to get rid of it. No one will want to go back to, no one will want to revert to it because they go, our patients love us, our partners love us. We get to protect the profits that we legally made. We get to actually keep all of this stuff instead of giving it all back or losing reputation and clients. So once you start thinking like it's an advantage versus a cost center or a speed bump or a hurdle that you have in the road, then people go, of course I'm going to keep my compliance program. I mean, thank you, OIG, for giving us the CIA. Appreciate that. But now we're actually leveraging this and we're doing so much better even as a company.
So, anybody on this call who feels, like they don't have the confidence or they don't know how to kind of pick the lock in terms of showing the ROI of a compliance program to their investor group or to their board or to their CEO. I'm not saying it's easy, but I love talking to you, Ross, because, you're at the kind of cutting edge of, you're dealing with clients who are in the business of making money. And you have successfully, time and time again, painted a picture and framed out what a compliance program can do for them in their pursuit of generating, enough returns for their investors to raise their next fund. Talk to me a little bit about how you talk about a compliance program or how you talk about kind of the ROI or the benefit to the organization from an enterprise value perspective with these prospective clients that you're doing business with, these private equity funds who I'm alluding to who are in the business of making money.
Yeah, I mean, at a just conceptual overarching basis, and I'd love to say that these are the 5 metrics that you can pull off the shelf and show your ROI, but you can't, right? You used to say you can't prove a negative. We didn't get sued, or we didn't get a UPIC on it, or we didn't get a TPE, right? That's just, you can't prove a negative, right? And so we call it the 3 Ps, right? First is patient trust equity. That's really important. Do your patients trust you as a healthcare organization? If you're defrauding the government, you're going to defraud me. You're going to order tests that I don't need. Profit protection, keep the money that you rightfully earned. And then preferred partner status, which is people want to do business with people who are ethical and are not getting in trouble, right? So conceptually, those are kind of the 3 Ps where we look at how do you actually gain that strategic advantage. In reality, it comes in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. And I think I learned this a lot in my previous job when we'd get sold, or we go to a private equity group, or we'd go to be public. We would get on these phone calls for due diligence, if everybody's ever done due diligence as a compliance officer, and I would say, here's my packet of information. These are the things that we did. This is what's happened. It took me an hour to go through it, and we never got another follow-up question again. All while legal and payroll and everybody else are on here for 5 days, hour after hour, explaining what they're doing. And so we see this as like a benefit to go, compliance, great. We're not going to show you to have a decrease in multiple. And that's another thing too, is when you go to market and you're getting sold or you're getting ready to be sold, somebody's going to come in, whether it's us, it's Marwood, it's, any of those other BRG, whatever. They're going to come in and look at the compliance program and they're going to say, is it good? Is it effective? Is it working? Yes, no, maybe. And at the end of the day, they're going to make a recommendation to the purchaser to say, you got an exposure here. They don't know what they're doing. Decrease the purchase price, decrease the multiple, put something in escrow. And that right there is a decrease in an ROI, right? I mean,
100%.
I don't know how you can explain it any more than that, as well as, hey, I have this huge refund and now I have all these fines and penalties. I could have saved you a bunch of fines and penalties as opposed to just refunding the money and doing it right in the first place. So those are the kind of things that you look at to say, how do we show our value? How do we ensure that we are the advantage for you, that you can go, wow, I have that. I don't have the problems that we're going to have. I don't have a decrease in multiple. I don't have an escrow. I don't have a person who walks away because we just don't know what we're doing. So those are a lot of the kind of the basic simple ones. And I know not everybody's here deals with private equity and a lot of private companies that are out there. I get that. There are multiple ways of showing your benefit. A lot of this has to do with patient trust equity, and I feel like that is a huge piece that we need to continue to focus on. But good value, quality care.
Even if we're not dealing with private equity or we're not, at that level where we're kind of wheeling and dealing with the board, I just think it's really important for us to know in our heart of hearts that these conversations are able to be had and that the value that compliance generates inside of an organization, while maybe more difficult to sort of pinpoint than some other sort of departments that are maybe sales or something like that, is real and is articulable. Okay, I can't even say articulable, but you know what I'm saying, is able to be articulated, okay? I think it's really important to know that in our heart of hearts. And that should give us, again, the confidence to exert ourselves as compliance executives, exert ourselves as business people, and really kind of bring that lens to bear within our organization.
Completely agree. Completely understand. And it's a hard thing to make sure that you're showing your ROI. But if you show it in the right way, it makes a huge amount of difference.
And just real quick before I ask this question, we're getting close on time here. I really love the way that you tend to talk to leadership, again, at the private equity level or at the CEO level, about compliance. You don't talk about the tools or the platforms or the initiatives as sort of compliance-centric things that are just to the benefit of compliance, but you really talk about them as enterprise-wide benefits or enterprise-wide tools. Talk to us a little bit about that kind of framework, because I think there's a lot that we can, let's just say creatively borrow. We don't need to say steal this time.
I talked a little bit about the disclosure program and what that means to an organization. And I think that's it's a sellable thing that you can sell as saying it's enterprise wide. But when you think about compliance, and again, I have this conversation quite a bit with different compliance officers, people who want to be compliance executives. There's this thing in compliance that, I'm not saying everybody does it, but there's this thing where we tend to take over and control of a lot of different things that may or may not be within our scope that we should do. Whether it's quality, it's human resources, it's finance, something out there, we overstep our boundaries. It happens all the time because people will come to compliance first because big C versus little c, right? We've talked about that before. Big C compliance is your program, is what you're required to do. Little c compliance is compliance with everything, right? So compliance is everywhere out there. And I mentor a lot of compliance executives this way. I was saying, look, your biggest value is going to be empowering those other departments to do what they need to do with your partnership. Not your control, not your oversight, not all those things. Maybe you have an HR issue that needs a compliance help with it, or a quality issue that compliance needs to opine on, but let those people be empowered to do what they need to do. That creates that partnership and that collaboration between different departments and creates you as a strategic partner versus someone who just wants to come over and take control over everything. We see it all the time. And you have to check your ego at the door, right? To say, I am going to help you be the best CHRO in the entire world, CIO, COO, CQ, quality officer, whoever. I am going to partner with you and I'm going to cover your back, but you're going to lead it and I'm going to help. And you don't start taking over those. You got to empower those people to be your partner. And that's how you become a strategic executive. Yeah.
I mean, maybe this is a stupid example. I think it's really apt though. And Hema Lomax shared this. If you want to empower, if you want to kind of embed compliant behavior, let's say with respect to crossing the street in your children, it's not that you have to only cross the street with them. You have to empower them to do that themselves. You have to teach them the frameworks and so forth so that you don't have to worry when they're crossing street when you're not there. And I think that same kind of mentality is exactly what you talked about. How can I empower you to be a better CIO, to be a better CFO, to be a better, department head of client success or whatever that is. All right. So how much time do we have here? We have 2 minutes. I'm going to ask you one more quick question. So if you were advising a colleague who just entered a CIA, what's the first thing you tell them to focus on? And what are some of the urgent items you would tell, the quote unquote urgent items that you would tell them to kind of deprioritize?
First and foremost, the three things, right? Leadership, disclosure program, auditing and monitoring. Policies and procedures will come along after you figured out what the company is doing, what's happening.
Great point.
The first thing that I always in training and education follows thereafter. It's not priority. Everybody wants to prioritize training and education policies and procedures right off the bat. Not important, as well as figuring out what it's to do. Don't put a policy and procedure in place without actually knowing what you're doing up front. Those are 2 words to live by. Secondly, whenever I get a CIA, the first thing I do is I spend hours outlining exactly what it is and exactly what I need to do, and the priorities being exactly what I said: leadership, disclosure program, auditing and monitoring, and the rest will actually follow. Even though they have my prescribed timelines, they will actually follow the way it should follow. So.
Well, thank you so much, Ross. Freaking awesome as usual. We got to have you back. You are one of my all-time favorite guests. Let's get a massive emoji explosion for the one and only Ross Ronan. Join us this Thursday. We're going to be talking about carrots and sticks. You know, everybody's talking about incentives. How do you actually put those into practice? We got a great episode with Matt Kelly and Sam Kellen. So I hope you all can join us, and we'll see you Thursday. Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.